2026. Can you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Perform roll call at this time. Councilor Benson.
Present.
Councilor Peterson.
Present.
Councilor Johnson.
Present.
Councilor DeWall.
Present.
Mayor Ward's also in attendance. Please let the minutes reflect all others in attendance. Looking for a motion to approve the pre-agenda minutes from February 12th, 2026.
So moved.
Councilor DeWall made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Sent by Councilor Benson. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Looking for a motion to approve the City Council regular meeting minutes from February 2nd, 2026.
So moved.
Councilor Benson made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Sent by Councilor Peterson. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Looking for a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Councilor DeWall made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Sent by Councilor Benson. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Brings us to the comment suggestion period of the meeting. The City of Proctor welcomes everyone to tonight's meeting. I got the wrong thing here, so I apologize. The council will now open the public comment and suggestion period of the meeting. This is a time set aside for members of the public, whether here in person or watching from home, to address the council on matters related to city business. Each speaker will be granted up to 3 minutes, and before you begin, please state your name and city where you reside for the record. If you're here representing an organization or the media, you're welcome to include that as well if you'd like. The council will listen to all comments, though we are not required to respond or take action during this portion of the meeting. Recording and photography are welcome, provided they don't disrupt the meeting or prevent others from being heard. All speakers are expected to maintain decorum and respect. Obscene, profane, threatening, or disruptive language or behavior will not be allowed. Anyone who continues to disrupt the meeting after a warning may be asked to leave or be removed under the presiding officer's authority to preserve order at this meeting, as provided by Minnesota Statute Section 412.191, Subdivision 2, and Chapter 31 of the Proctor City Code. Once the public comment suggestion period concludes, the council will move on with the agenda, and no further public input will be taken unless recognized by the mayor. If you'd like to speak, please come forward to the podium or dial 218-628-6268 to participate remotely. We'll pause briefly to give everyone a chance to join us. Hearing none, we'll move on. Looking for a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda.
So moved.
Councilor Johnson made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Sent by Councilor Peterson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Bring us to 6A, Trail Feasibility Report. We have Tyler here with SEH, and he's going to do a presentation for us.
Thank you, Mayor Ward and members of the council. I am Tyler Hinsdall at SEH, the city engineer for Proctor. Going to be presenting on our Member Trail feasibility study that we recently completed for the city. We will go through a bit of purpose and scope, background, route selection, trail characteristics, funding and costs, as well as schedule and then recommendations. So some of the purpose and scope, some of the study objectives was to evaluate the different routes for the Mocha Trail Spur through Proctor, prepare a cost estimation so we can proceed with funding strategies in the future, and then what some of those funding strategies are, and discussion about some of the regional partnerships and some of the planning happening in this whole process. So some of the project scope, we identified a preferred route through the city of Proctor, and this report talks about the evaluation of that route. Some of the community benefits by adding a trail, enhancing recreation through the city and the community, active transportation, alternative transportation, increasing community health, and then increasing enhancement of tourism to the city. The land use strategy, utilizing public corridors where possible, and any easements that we could utilize, and then making connections to the Proctor public recreational facilities and future trail connection opportunities through the corridor. So some of the project background, back on November 17th of 25, council authorized us to prepare a feasibility report. So at that point, we started looking, or taking a step back, looking at some of the broad planning efforts that we went through. We met with St. Louis County, Hermantown, Duluth, MnDOT, the Arrowhead Regional Development Commission, and the Metropolitan Interstate Commission representatives to discuss how the Munger Trail would feasibly be routed from, or the spur would be routed connecting to Hermantown, Duluth community, Proctor community, and then eventually south all the way to the Munger Trail. We had multiple meetings with that group in this planning. That's where this initial preferred route kind of was spurred from. So then there's also the NIC, Duluth Superior Area Bike Transportation Plan. You can find that online as well. They have a pretty intense mapping system of that. And we use that along with the discussions with that group to do some of this trail planning. And so then trying to see, what's the best way to connect the surrounding communities and their vast trail networks. Duluth has a lot of trail systems, and how can we get connected to that property to open up that opportunity for the community. And then also ultimately the Willard-Munger Trail connection, which is identified in the 2015 Proctor Hermantown Munger Trail Spur Master Plan. The Munger Trail is roughly 70 miles in length, connecting Hinckley to Duluth. And so this spur is discussed and identified in that plan to connect Hermantown to Proctor and then all the way down the Munger Trail. Continuing with some of that project background and route evaluation, so once we kind of looked at all the broad connections and where we could connect to, we focused more on the planning efforts of Proctor community and how do we actually make a connection to Proctor. So in the Hermantown Proctor Master Plan, it identifies a Highway 2 crossing at 2nd Street, and good timing with the U.S. Highway 2 reconstruction project with MnDOT. We started evaluating that actual crossing at 2nd Street, but it was determined to be not feasible because very tight intersection with right-of-way. Those buildings are right up close to the roadway, not enough room for a wide enough trail for this kind of connection. So what's the next best option that we looked at was the other signalized intersection down at Boundary Avenue. This one had a lot more right-of-way room to fit a trail in there. And so we started discussions with the county and MnDOT and Duluth to talk about, okay, if we use this location, how could we then connect to Hermantown and Duluth from this angle of things? And so we started that discussion coming up as a future phase, potentially along Boundary crossing Boundary Avenue into that Minnesota power easement that heads off to the northeast into Duluth, and then connecting to Duluth and Hermantown from there. So then once we identified that the Boundary Avenue Highway 2 intersection was the point that we wanted to make the Highway 2 crossing at, we figured, well, what's our next route to get south towards Interstate 35? And also with the consideration of how do we connect to our parks and softball field and everything. So first we thought, well, what about going down Boundary Avenue and then over on Kirkus Street? But the big constraint there is that bridge crossing on Boundary over the creek, it has a 5-foot sidewalk, unable to be widened unless you do some pretty extensive bridge reconstruction there. So we pushed that one aside for the time being, and then we looked at, okay, let's not go quite so far south, and then let's go down on south on Boundary Avenue from the intersection, along Alice Street, and then cut through to behind the golf course. And the problem with that one was the corner of Boundary and Alice Street there gets very narrow, great challenges, big rocks there adjacent to the parking lot. So we thought, let's try going around the other side of those buildings down to Alice Street, and there's that Minnesota Power easement that continues to the southwest from that intersection of Boundary and Highway 2. So assuming that Minnesota Power would agree to putting a trail within that easement, we looked at routing it down through that easement to Alice Street, to the west off of Alice Street, off the end of Alice Street, and then onto city land, down south of the public golf course, and then crossing Kingsbury Creek, and then looping around along the softball fields and the playground for everybody. And so that became the current preferred route that was looked at in more detail with the study. This route set us up for future extensions, with the extension to the northeast to Duluth and Hermantown, but also a future connection to the south by Peon and Kirkus and the Proctor development that's currently being done, which they intend from recent discussions that it might have some type of trail system coming out of that, but it could be a continuation of this trail, which would get us one step closer down towards Westgate Boulevard and crossing I-35. And so I'll mention too, with the getting, as a future phase, getting down Westgate Boulevard, we recently submitted our application for the rehab of Westgate Boulevard, which we included a new trail segment along Westgate to Hugstead Road, where you can cross under I-35 at that point, which would open up access to Spirit Mountain and then future down the hill towards the Mountain Trail.
Excuse me.
So yep, go ahead.
When you say down the hill to Munger Trail, are you referring down the hill into Duluth or down the hill heading west?
It's a little bit undetermined, I would say, at this point. It depends on some of the constraints as future feasibility stages moving south, but it was discussed potentially going west towards Beck's Road and down the hill. There's also consideration with our connection to the northeast off Highway 2 and Boundary Avenue, that connection to Duluth, but they have some future ideas of getting that also down the hill in Duluth to the Munger Trail, so there might be multiple points that you could access going in the direction of this trail.
Very good, thank you.
Yep. So some of the preferred route characteristics, so we looked at a 10-foot wide bituminous trail, which meets state federal aid standards. We also looked at other state federal aid standards for alignment, profile grades, ADA compliancy, just at a high level to get an idea to make sure that this trail would fit and meet those requirements, so if we go after any state or federal funding, that we know it can get paid for. It's roughly 3,400 foot trail segment from Boundary Avenue Highway 2 intersection to Kirkus Peon intersection. And Alice Street portion, and that's the majority of it is a rural section style trail, so it's not along a street corridor. But there's a 700-foot section along Alice Street that we included, adding a new curb and gutter and some storm sewer on the south side of the street, and running that trail behind the curb and gutter in that urban area, so it'd be similar to your Second Street project. The big design constraint is the Kingsbury Creek crossing, and that's also the highest cost item on the cost estimate. So we took a quick look at, where can we cross this creek? We looked at different alternatives. The one that seemed to fit best was running it to the southwest corner of the golf course. It was a narrowed point in the FEMA mapping and floodplain, which helps narrowing that bridge span length. So we looked at some rough modeling based on the recent FEMA mapping updates. And so looking at a 100-year flood event and meeting a FEMA no-rise certificate, which is basically, what am I trying to say? It has a less impact on during flood events by meeting that certificate, and then also it streamlines the whole permitting process. So if you end up impacting that floodway in a 100-year event, you have to model a whole lot more and do changes potentially that are impacting that floodway. So meeting that FEMA no-rise certificate is a critical piece to kind of keep that project moving and designing a bridge that meets that standard and gets you going without excessive costs. So what we came up with in that 100-year flood event modeling is approximately a 100-foot clear span bridge. For the cost estimating purposes, we assumed it would be a prefabricated steel bridge with timber decking, which is pretty consistent with a lot of those pedestrian bridges you see around here. The one on the picture on that slide is a similar style down at Lester Creek Crossing, or Lester River Crossing on the lake walk over in Lakeside. And so then again, we looked at the future connections piece of this as well, with the Highway 2 crossing into Duluth, and then the future, on the next map, is there's a future connection that you can look at to get up to the Second Street Trail that was recently built, which would connect the service system to the parks, and then eventually to this homeowner trail network and the other networks. And then obviously the connection down at the south end of the Peter development and the Mountain Trail. So the next one shows a map. I know you can't really read anything on it. It's pulled right out of the report, so if you have a copy of the report or get a copy of the report, you can look at that in more detail. But it shows up on the upper right is the intersection of Highway 2 Boundary Avenue, and then the kind of bold red line there is the trail route that we studied in this report. And so it comes down that Listen Bar easement down to Alice Street, changes to a Goodland section to the end of Alice, and then into city land, where that big green blob, that's technically the national wetland inventory, but that also mimics kind of the creek path and floodway. So you can see it next down where we cross it. So that's that point that we make for the bridge location. And then it loops around onto what is now a maintenance path between that playground for everybody and softball fields. And then there's a dashed line that heads north where the bridge will be crossing along the east side of the football field and softball field. That is a maintenance path that heads north, which would be a potential future connection to that Second Street trail. Some of the alternatives that we list in the report is alternative 1, do nothing. This would not promote alternative access or transportation or recreational access in the city. It would keep Proctor isolated from the surrounding communities and their trail networks, and it would kind of eliminate, at least with this phase, a future connection to Lumber promotes alternative transportation methods and increases the recreational access to parks and facilities of Proctor. It provides future pedestrian bike access to the surrounding communities. And so that's why we recommended it. Alternative 3, project phasing. I would also recommend this if for some reason the budget doesn't fit with the city. We potentially split this into 2 smaller projects, maybe pick away, get the bridge done, and then do the trail portion later. Or phase in lighting at a different time, that kind of thing. But it still meets the needs of the overall scope of the project. So then the next slide is their cost estimate. So we did this for the alternative 2, as well as I have funding that will cover on this slide. So the first 3 items are kind of the major points or major construction costs. Number 1 is the trail only portion of it, which comes out to roughly $730,000. The pedestrian bridge is roughly $550,000, and the trail lighting is roughly $230,000. So the total estimated construction cost is around $1.5 million. You'll see in the asterisk there that includes a 15% contingency on all those costs, construction costs, just because of the level of design that we're at right now. We include that hefty contingency on it. So the total estimated project is at roughly $1.9 million. That includes all the construction costs from above with their 15% contingency, as well as a 28% on top of that for soft costs, engineering, administration, and legal fees. So 1.9 as a total project. So some of the funding opportunities with this is obviously the city's sales tax revenue, which is specifically allocated towards trails and beyond the trail spur itself. City issued bonds, PUC funds for any potential lighting on the project, which we did include that. Oh yeah, I listed that already, but we included lighting on the project for this estimate anyways. And then potential grant funding opportunities. And so I'm working with city administration right now on 2 TNR grant opportunities, one for local trails program and one regional trails program. Both of which I think have a good shot for this project. So hopefully we can make that successful. So then moving on to project schedule. So I'm obviously here presenting to council today. I would consider ordering a public informational meeting. That can always happen at a later date at a final design stage, but at some point engaging with the community. Applying for TNR trail funding here in the end of February and March. Those grant opportunities are due at the end of March, I believe. And then after that, at some point, maybe after you hear back on those funding opportunities, we would recommend council ordering the improvements and preparation of plans and specs. And then after that, we would begin on final design plans and specifications in the early summer and present those final plans and specs to council and have them and recommend them to authorize advertisement for bids in November of 26, with advertisement of the bids in December, bid opening in January, and then potentially awarding in January as well for construction in 2027. That's just a rough schedule. If we want to streamline this thing, council feels that it doesn't align with the budget, or you want to push off a little bit and think about your routes, that kind of thing, we can always modify the schedule that, or if it needs to be more aligned with the DNR grants, if you're successful with those, it might get adjusted. So in summary, we just concluded that the project is feasible based on general engineering principles, practices, and construction procedures. The project is necessary to provide recreational access, alternative transportation, and future connections to the Lumber Trail and the Duluth-Vernon Town Trail networks. The project is cost effective when all related costs are considered, and we recommend acceptance of this feasibility report and consideration of holding a public informational meeting and preparation of grant funding applications.
Council have any questions?
Yes,
Councilor Johnson?
I have two. Why lights?
Why lights? We put that in there as just an option to light the trail system if you want users to ride along the trail at night. I know it runs behind the golf course through some wooded areas, so maybe a safety factor. No, it doesn't have to happen, this is just a,
I just look at the Munger Trail doesn't have lights. And the Duluth Trail and Hermantown Trail don't have lights.
I think some of the trail systems in Duluth have.
Oh,
lights,
yeah,
but
you're right.
It depends
Yeah,
on
yeah,
where
they do.
they're at in the city a lot of times,
Yeah.
I think. But it's just for the feasibility study to get an idea. If you wanted lights, that's what it would cost.
Okay,
You're not held to anything with this report at this point.
okay, that's, it's just a question.
Also, Counselor Johnson, I might add that this is like considered the inner city section of the trail, right? And it connects up to other parts of our parks, our softball fields, our golf course. You know, when we go into the more rural areas of the Munger Trail, I wouldn't expect that those would have lights.
Okay, I understand that. No. The other question I have is, why just not come down the power lines the whole way?
Get a look at that real quick.
I can start answering that.
Good.
We did look at it, but that floodplain at that power line crossing and Kingsbury Creek, the floodplain is so wide, your bridge would have been probably 3 times the size to span the floodplain.
At
So-
least, measure 10 times the size.
And a straight path is rather boring.
And we also looked at coming across Alice Street to the south along First Avenue, crossing the creek, because it's narrow there as well. But there's a lot of grade challenges there that would not be safe by the standard of the trail. Or you'd have to be cutting into a hill or filling, I can't remember, next to a home, which isn't ideal.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor
Piggyback
Peterson?
off that last, the power line comment. So, this trail route as of right now is Minnesota Power approved?
Not as of yet.
So we haven't gotten that approved. Do we know that they approve things like this in Duluth, let's just say? I know there's trails that run along it, up it.
Yeah, I know we, in SEH, we worked on other trail projects that go through power line easements like that. I know we worked with them with the sand salt dome, in Proctor and allowing that access road to be built through there. I would imagine they'd be open to it because honestly, they might use it for maintenance purposes as well, and that might be part of the agreement for putting it there. But I would definitely recommend that we reach out to them early on
Yeah.
if this moves forward to make sure that we can go with that route.
Okay.
Good question.
Second question, and this might be you or Jess. This is not going to affect our pickleball location at all with where the trail ends. It looked like it was close, but it probably would be fine. I was just making sure that we're not doing a study on the pickleball court and then all of a sudden now there's a trail through it.
When we decided to look at the outfield of field number 2
Yep.
for the pickleball location, it will come close to the pickleball,
But
but
we'll still be good.
yeah.
Okay. I have a few. Third question, the grants. Now, I'm sure you can't answer this, but when we do a grant for something like this, let's just say a $2 million project, is there a percentage they go off of? Do they go off of a amount? Can you get a third of it? You know, is there any kind of parameters that you know of?
The 2 grants that we've discussed so far, the local chairs and the regional, I believe one is the $250,000 max ask, and the other one I think is $300,000. And basically they allow you to ask within a range for a certain amount. And I do know that last year it sounded like only 1 application came in for the regional trail system, which this I definitely would argue is part of the regional trail system, at least will be in the future.
So we could be close to a third of the project.
And then both those have a 25% match too from us.
Okay. No, I did think about the light thing, and it's an expensive cost, but I think about summertime, I think about kids playing at the playground. I mean, it probably would be, I mean, I know it's an expensive thing, but just imagine the kids that could go from there over to their houses, right? Not that I'm for or against it, I was just thinking that. And then the last question is more of a Jess question is, as of right now, I know we've enacted the tax. Are we, do you know what we have for total amount for that tax right now is?
I don't have that number, but in your financial report, the part of your first sales tax, you could use for trails. And what you're collecting annually right now in that initial one is around $500,000 a year.
Okay, so we're getting.
Yeah, and I know that
nice
there's a
little chunk.
large fund balance in that, so, so just alone in the sales tax, it would be funded. It could be funded if you don't get the grants as well.
Okay.
but-
I just, I feel like it's a good opportunity to connect our communities together, and it will bring people into the city. It will bring people to spend some money, I'm guessing. You know, bikers like to stop for a beer or a sandwich, maybe a piece of pizza at Proctor Pizza. So I love the idea of starting this process now because there's so much potential for it in the future. So thank you for the presentation.
Anyone else?
I think they might stop and try to buy a Proctor journal too.
You never know. You never know. We could have it right along the trail. Put a little, like a little
Kiosk
electric.
there.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thanks, Ty.
All right, so you heard the recommendations from SEH, looking for acceptance of this feasibility study.
I'll move the acceptance.
Counselor Benson made the motion. Is there a second? Second by Counselor Johnson. Any further discussion on that? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Brings us to 6B, Resolution 04-26, Department of Natural Resource Local Trails Connection Program. This is one of the grant opportunities Tyler was just speaking of. Is there a motion to approve Resolution 04-26?
So moved.
Counselor Peterson made the motion. Is there a second?
Support.
Supported by Counselor Benson. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Brings us to 6C, Resolution 05-26, Department of Natural Resources Regional Trails Program. Here's another funding opportunity Tyler mentioned. So is there a motion to approve Resolution 05-26?
So moved.
Counselor Peterson, I think, made the motion. Is there a second? Second by Counselor Johnson. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Brings us to 6D, Highway 2 Final Lighting Design Supplemental Letter of Agreement with SEH. Is there a motion to approve the supplemental letter of agreement?
Moved.
Counselor Benson made the motion. Is there a second? I'll second that. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Brings us to 6E, PUC and City Garage change orders number 2 and number 3. So again, in your packet is a couple of change orders. We'll take these separate, well, we can do them together, I guess. It looks like number 2 is a change order that was a good change order, and number 3 was rejected due to future changes. Is there a motion to go with those 2 recommendations?
So moved.
Counselor Peterson made the motion to accept change order number 2 and deny or reject change order number 3. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Benson. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Brings us to number 7, closed session. This portion of the meeting will be closed as permitted by section 13D.03 to consider strategy for labor negotiations. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So move.
Counselor Johnson made a motion. Is there a second? I'll second that. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes.
That, today I was at a meeting for the Proctor Scholarship Committee and had 20 seniors interviewing for scholarships. And it was pretty awesome walking out of there. Ladies and men that we produce at Proctor High School. Pretty cool.
Awesome. Yep, thank you. Counselor Benson?
As we're talking about the future graduates and athletics with the Mirage at the state, also have to give congratulations to the Proctor High School math team that won the Section 7 tournament, and now they're ranked second in the state. So we got a great set of kids, and obviously we do well in our community.
I think I just saw a unified team went to state too as well, correct? A unified team?
Yeah, the unified team placed second in the state for the second year in a row.
Congrats to all of them. Academics and athletics, that's nice to see. I just got one thing, just a reminder, if you didn't see the email, our March 16th meeting will be with the Police Civil Service Commission starting at 4:30. So if that's not on your calendar, please make sure it is. That's a yearly meeting that we do. So it's a good recap for everybody. And that is all I have. Administrator Rich?
I have nothing, Mayor.
Thank you. Attorney Henke? With that being said, we'll entertain a motion to pay the bills in the amount of $140,030.69.
So moved.
Counselor Peterson made the motion. Is there a second? Second by
Second.
Counselor Johnson. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Looking for a motion to adjourn. I'll make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Peterson. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Thank you.